everyone can see that?
Yes.
Yes, okay, good. Yeah, Dr. Moore, I don't have any access now to the chat. So if anybody has any questions, if you can relay those to me, or they can unmute themselves and ask those questions. All right, so here we go. Libraries as partners in equities. As Dr. Moore said, I am a high school librarian in San Antonio, but I started teaching second grade in 1995, or as my daughter likes to say, in the 1900s. So I was there for about, gosh, I guess I was there for 4 or 5 years before I stopped to have my 2 children. I was out of the classroom for 7 years. And then when I returned, I was a brand new librarian in a brand new district, opening a brand new school. So that was a really high hurdle to jump over. But the good news was that the staff, a lot of the staff that came to that new school really, I mean, this is good and bad news. They really didn't have great experiences with their previous librarians. And so it was kind of, it was building relationships in the best way possible, and just making up all kinds of really great things that I still do now. So I'm currently a high school librarian here in San Antonio, and like Dr. Moore said, serving as the chair of Texas Association of School Libraries. So when I'm talking about equity issues, I'm going to be looking at 4 areas of a library program, a full library program. And when I'm talking about equity, I want you to kind of think about this whenever we're talking about the 4 areas. What ways can we bring different people to our library program with these 4 different things, right? So who is being helped by the way we look at these 4 different pieces of a library program. Okay, so the first one we're going to take a look at is books. And so tell me in the chat, or you can unmute yourself, in what ways can books be equalizers, or can kind of maybe give someone an edge into this library world or this educational world? And that can be just in general, so not really looking at the four things that I have on there, but how do we have, or how can books serve as an entryway, I guess, for our students?
Caroline says offer books that are inclusive, promote diversity and equity.
Yes.
Jackie, oh, sorry, go ahead.
You can just read off the, yeah.
Okay, Jackie says books can give them a sense of belonging. Christy says books can mirror our culture or serve as windows to other cultures. Lauren says it does not matter your SES, the books are available for all. Rachel says having a variety of topics to reach all students. And Amanda says students can see themselves in literature.
Okay, good. Those are all excellent questions. So now, responses, but now I want you to think about books and how they can help you in this kind of equity topic, how they can help in a different way. So think about your print books that you have. What are some possible obstacles that might happen, and really kind of thinking about, just print. What kind of obstacles might that create for some students? So just plain print books.
Denise says, sorry, I just jumped. Size of print for dyslexia kids. Diane says language. Michael says fixed limited access. Good. Rain says accessibility.
Yes, perfect. Those are all excellent ways to think about that. Think about your library policy. If you have a library policy about overdue books, right? Students can't check anything else if something is overdue, or they have to pay a fine. That's another hurdle, right, that we're creating for students with print books. And so also just the way you said, languages, right? So if we just have books in one dominant language, right, we're missing those students who may not have, say, English as their primary language, right? They need a little assistance. With a digital book, print is excellent, and print you do need because my students certainly have talked to me about this a lot, especially coming out of COVID kind of isolation periods, that their attention span has dwindled immensely. They are easily distracted on a device, on their phone. If they're trying to read a book on their phone, or if they're trying to read it on a computer, it's very easy to just kind of flip over and flip to the next app. And so the print book kind of helps them focus a little bit more, but you have to kind of look at what specific kind of print books that you have, right? And that's where we get into length and format and genre. We also think about the big print books, right? The large print books. Those of you who have students who might have visual impairments, right? What do the regular size prints, what obstacles do those create? And how can adding large print books to your collection help them? Digital books, if we move to the digital books, why you should consider having those in your program, again, because you don't have the accessibility issue. Someone mentioned that, right? Like maybe they have a teacher that isn't bringing them into the library enough. They don't get to school early enough to come to the library before school. There are no overdue or late fees for digital books, right? It just is automatically returned for them. For the digital books, you can enlarge the font size for your visually impaired students. Some of the digital books, right, can be read aloud. That's a nice option. Or you can have students listen to audiobooks, right? That's another option for digital. So think about those ways that you can increase, I guess, pathways to books, print or digital. So think about that. Think about format, right? So why should formatting be a consideration? We already talked about the large print and how that can help visually impaired students, but also think about maybe larger print. To me, my students have told me, my ESL students, we have a large ESL population or ELL population on our campus, and they sometimes prefer the larger print because it's easier to try and decipher the words in the larger print format. But also think about graphic novels, right? Who are we attracting with graphic novels, or what pathways, who are we helping when we include graphic novels in our collection? And I'll open that up to responses in the chat.
I do want to jump back real quick with 2 comments about the print and digital. Accessibility was mentioned about outside of school, and the number of students who don't have access to Wi-Fi devices, especially during summertime. Yes. Regarding the graphic novels, Sabrina says reluctant readers and emerging readers. Rachel says my special ed life skills kids love graphic novels. Cecilia says reluctant readers gravitate towards graphic novels. Jackie says low readers, striving students, students who love fantasy, students who love pictures. Amanda says my students with dyslexia tend to gravitate to graphic novels.
Right. So those are great answers. And that's a lot of your students. And maybe you don't know those students that are coming in and maybe they don't know that why they're struggling with the standard print book, but the graphic novels can certainly help them. Again, I'm thinking of my ELL students having that, they don't want like an elementary primary picture book, like a traditional picture book, but a graphic novel that talks about things that they might be interested in, right? That's appropriate for their age level. The images on there certainly help them decode some of the language that's in there. So there's lots of really great reasons why we should include a specific graphic novel section in our library. When we're talking about a genre, right, I'm thinking about novel and verse. Novel and verse has been a huge push for me in the last, since I've been in high school, I would say. So the last 6 years, because again, there's not as much print on that page. And so the text can really help with those, again, reluctant readers or the students who have been struggling with reading. So whenever, again, they don't want those small like Orca books or the high-low readers, because they look very different than the books that their other friends are checking out from the library, right? That are very thin. They, you know, the wording, it just looks very, very different. So having a novel in verse, sometimes those are chunky books, right? So it looks like they're, you know, checking out something that's maybe a higher level, a reading level. And you know, I always tell them, I'm like, look, this helps you if you don't have that stamina built up yet to finish a complete full novel. The novel in verse is nice. They're short pages. You can get through lots of pages in a short amount of time. So consider those, and consider marking those on your shelves so that your students can identify which books those are quickly. The length kind of is the same thing, right? So the length, you don't want to have a whole, I was looking at specifically fantasy, right? The fantasy books are so long. They are 400 or 500 pages long, 300 pages long. How can we maybe look for a different fantasy books that are just shorter in length, or just make sure that you have lots of other books that are definitely shorter in length. It's not going to be imposing to anybody who is struggling with their reading. So think about that. And then of course, you guys mentioned diversity. That is a huge thing, but also not thinking of just cultural diversity or racial diversity, but thinking of, you know, abilities or family situations, things like that. So make sure when you're looking for those books, you're looking for all different kinds of diversity options. All right, let's, oh, let me see. Can I move? Okay. If you don't have money in your budget, right, for a specified large print section, so I have a defined section in my library for just large print books, right? So if somebody needs access to that, they can go there. But what I also have are these little kind of reader tools on that picture that has all the different tools on them. The two things on the right are magnifiers, right? So if a student who needs larger print and I don't have that title in large print, then they can certainly take out some of my magnifiers. On some of the books, we have the old school library pockets where you used to put the check-in, check-out date cards. And I just put these little magnifiers or the different colored overlays. And I took a picture of what they could look like, right? So we have one that has very different colors on the top, but then it has that kind of reader line. So the students can kind of drag that down as they're reading line by line. And then we have this other one that just highlights basically the line. So line by line they go through. Again, if you think about this, this isn't necessarily just for students who have a visual impairment, but this could be for students who are learning the language, learning English, or students who maybe, again, just have trouble focusing on one page at a time, right? Like this kind of helps them. I've been really interested to see when I show students, just different students, some of these, they're like, oh, I had no idea. Let me just try it. And I have different colors of the highlighter, the thin highlighter ones, different colors of the full colored overlays there. So they can just try whatever is going to help them. This is another way that you can kind of broaden access to these books for students. Any questions on that?
Lucy, yes. Cecilia asks, do you check these out to students or to teachers that work with these students?
Sorry. So these little things, yes, they can be checked out to students, but what I generally do is I just have a little pocket on the inside front cover of the books. And these are self-adhesive, like kind of old school library pockets. And I stick the little, the magnifier or the overlay in that pocket. And the students can try different, we have a bunch of them at the circulation desk, and the students can just try the different colors that they want, or they can take a couple of them home. These are very cheap. These are, I feel like I got a packet of 10 or 15 of them for less than $20 on Amazon. So they're not cost prohibitive. They're certainly cheaper than a large print book, right? So this is just an easy way to maybe help some of those students there. Okay, any more?
Inez points out that the large print helps adults too. Yes. And I can agree. I can agree with that one.
As I'm using my readers to write my notes.
Caroline pointed out that the colored overlays and magnifiers can often be found in the special ed departments. Inez says she has found the overlays at Dollar Tree.
Oh, good.
Sabrina said she thinks it's important to consider lighting In the environment with the print texts, that some students with visual impairments may struggle with darker settings, having some lamps that they can sit next to may help.
Oh, good.
Jackie suggested cutting up translucent colored file folders for overlays. And Cecilia is agreeing with Caroline. Thank you for the suggestion.
I haven't seen those translucent file folders, but that sounds exciting. Yes, lots of really great ideas. Dollar Tree, I feel, is like a teacher's heaven, a creative teacher's haven. There's all kinds of great things that you can use there to help our students. Okay, so let's talk about digital resources. We talked about ebooks and audiobooks and the benefits that we have there, but let's talk a little bit about the databases. So what part do databases play in equity in the library? And I'll give you some time to type those responses in the chat. So how do databases help us with equity?
Jackie says they can highlight what we have and what we need. Rachel says access to more than the books in a library. Michael says trusted sources for research and info. Stephanie, different reading levels within the database.
Yes.
Christy, databases sometimes allow access to costly resources. Inez says everyone has access to, sorry, it's jumping, the resources anywhere. Caroline says databases help with equity because they provide access to more current resources. Sabrina says it may provide some students with knowledge that they can't get firsthand. I remember at a training, the instructors talked about how students who can't be taken to the Arboretum can still learn about different types of flowers, for example. Stephanie talks about multiple language choices, and Cecilia follows that with they can often be translated.
Good. So I'm glad y'all mentioned that. So definitely one of my favorite things about the databases, in addition to everything that you said, is the fact that these can be translated into different languages, right? And so many of them have so many different languages available, like 27 different languages, which is very, very helpful. Also, just like the ebooks, the text can be enlarged for those students who need that piece. And these can also oftentimes be read aloud, right? So you've got students who might be struggling with reading. The people who are learning English, these can be read aloud in English, or they can be translated into the different languages. The other thing that I wanted to say, too, is the definitions, right? So if a lot of times some of these articles are maybe just a little bit harder for some of our students to read. And so the dictionary kind of insert in the database, that dictionary tool is super helpful for students. But I want you to consider this. Think about, and again, because I'm coming from a high school library, I am very fortunate that all of my English teachers, each level in my English English curriculum, they all have a research piece, and they all bring them into the library to have experience with the database. And this, I think, is really important because we get to hit then all of those students who are not in the dual credit, the students who are not in the AP classes, who aren't in your traditional kind of college prep classes. They all have access into that. So if I have a student then who's going to a community college, but didn't take any of the dual credit classes or the AP classes or a college prep class, they still have access to what a database can do for you. This is why I think it's super important for you to have those conversations with your teachers. And this is something that you definitely need to bring up with them whenever they're like, oh, but my students, we don't have time, or my students aren't going to get there. Remind them that even though they're not in those AP classes, you've got college-bound students in your regular standard English classes, and they need to have access to what an academic paper could look like, or what sources or what databases they might find on their college campus when they decide to go.
And I'd like to jump in that Deirdre said the databases are a convenient way to access information in a central hub. And then Lauren pointed out that some of the databases have tools for readers, like read alouds.
Yes.
So it's great for students that need the help, but they want to feel independent when researching.
Definitely. Those are all excellent sources and reasons. All right, let's talk about your spaces now in your library. Think about your library layout. Think about, well, what it could look like if you're not in a library. Think about the library that is in your current school, wherever you're working right now. Um, and think about the shelving. So there's been a big deal right now with dynamic shelving online, right? If you kind of just search that hashtag, you see lots of librarians kind of shifting a little bit more to a bookstore style presentation of the books, right? Covers out, the covers are the most interesting parts of some of these books. And so you want to, grab attention that way. But I also want to talk about genreifying your library. So when I was in my middle school library, I was that diehard librarian who was like, no, you need to, my job is to teach you names of authors so that you can, look for authors by their last name. It's all arranged there, and teach them how to use the online catalog. And those are great things. And I still teach my students how to do that. But I'm also missing a lot of students who don't want to mess with those things, right? Who aren't going to know the author's last name. And so I moved to genreifying my library in middle school. And the increase in circulation was incredible. And it was so impressive. And I really kind of equated it to myself when I go shopping. I am not a clothes shopper. I don't enjoy it. There used to be a really great place called Charming Charlie's that no longer is around in San Antonio. But they would have, blue shirts to this side and red shirts to this side. And it was really helpful. When I knew I needed to go in for a black shirt, I'd go to that black section and I would just pick up that black shirt. Those of you who are of a certain age might remember the old Garanimals, matching the animals to make sure that your clothes matched as little kids. And I kind of associate my genreifying the library that way, right? If a student just really likes, and this was in middle school, so we had a funny section, a humorous section. They just wanted those silly books, then they went to that specific section. If they just liked mystery books, they could go there. And so that opened up, again, the students don't want to ask sometimes, they don't want to ask for help, which book can you recommend or whatever, but I know I like this book. And when I talk to this kind of book, when I talk to my students, I talk to them about using Netflix, right, or Amazon and Prime, or Hulu, whenever they're searching for movies, right? They have them in categories. And to me, that makes the most sense to have our books kind of arranged in categories so that students have an entryway into that. And especially those students who, again, I'm coming from high school, those students who have been unsuccessful readers for a long time, how they don't know what kind of book to look for, but they know they like scary movies. So let's go to the horror section and let's try and find you something there. Or they like, fantasy movies, they like The Hobbit or something else like that. Then let's maybe try something in the fantasy section. So just easier pathways into books. How can your shelving and your library layout work for you in that case? I want to talk, well, let me see. Do we have a little bit of time? I might come back to that in just a second. Let's talk about furniture for a bit, and I'm going to show you some pictures from my library. So think about the different kinds of furniture that you have, and I want you to look at that picture that's on the right-hand side. We've got a cafe booth and then cafe tables. And a couple of things, when I started buying furniture for the library in my high school library, I was talking to my principal and I said, the kids sit in a desk all day, or they're in a cafeteria at that same kind of seat height all day. And so I wanted to have just different, standard heights. And that's something that he looked at me, he's like, I never even considered that. I was like, well, the kids are tired of sitting that low. Sometimes they just want to stand, right? So you just want to, have some tall tables or higher seating spaces. The other thing is, of course, you definitely want to have the soft seating, right? So the kids are in the hard desks all the time. So make sure that you have some piece of soft furniture seating. in there. And then also think about kind of the social aspects of your students. Some students just want to be with their friends. Some students want to be in the library, but they maybe don't have a circle of friends that they want to be with. So at that top picture, having those big club chairs, those to me were for kids who want to be in the library but don't want to be like noticed as having nobody sit next to them, right? Like they are choosing to be in this one person seat, right? Nobody else can be around me. Also, try if you can have a space for kind of independent or quiet study. We were able to find these study carrels. They were pretty expensive, but I feel like you could probably make little areas there with just maybe older desks, or you could have some kind of a paneling area to create this little study session area. Again, think about your library having different zones. You want to have a zone for the very social aspect of your library. You want to have the zone for those just comfortable, relaxed chairs. You want to have that study zone. And then, of course, you need to have workspaces. And I didn't include a picture of any of our workspaces, but the regular tables that you would have. If you can, the flexible furniture has been a huge bonus. I see that came, I think, right in August of 2019. So we got to enjoy them for 6 months before everything was shut down. But to move furniture out of the way, or to make larger workspaces for the different groups that you might have, those are always really helpful. Also, we have some tables in our library that have white space or whiteboard tops, so that's really nice to have the students be able to have a workspace, and they come in, they pick out the dry erase markers. For me in the library, I did have them at the tables and they could use them, and then that created a whole lot of problems, so I got smart and put them with me, and if they needed markers, they could come up to the desk and get some dry erase markers there. Let's see, what else do I want to talk about here?
Sorry, my cat needed to make an appearance, but
yeah.
regarding the furniture and the
Yeah.
seating, Rachel says people will give you furniture for free, that she has 6 chairs collected from staff moving, downsizing, etc. And she even has a church pew.
Nice.
And then Michael asks, do you think that helps transition to the college library aesthetic for familiarity too?
A lot of my students have come in to say that, yes. So a quick backstory with my library. My school opened in 1978. And when I was hired there in 2016, I was replacing the library who opened the school. So she had been there for 38 years. And this was a very traditional library, right? Like a book warehouse. There were that seating area where you see the kids in the cafe booths, that whole area was full of bookcases. The seating area where you see the study carrels, that entire space was full of bookcases. And so the principal at that time, he wanted to make some changes. And this is why I jumped so fast to this campus. One, my daughter was there. It's the school where my daughters attended. And he also looked at the library and wanted to address things in the library, which is the most rare thing that I have ever heard of, a principal actually being proactive in looking at the library and how it can work for all students. And so when he and I spoke, and in the interviews and kind of a little bit before the interviews, I was talking to him about what his vision was for the library. And he wanted a place where students could gather. And so when the students come to me from middle school, it is a very different kind of space. But also it's, again, it's larger than their middle school library, and you can do several different things in that space. And so, yeah, I do think it is sort of a transition. The kids have told me that it does look like a college library to them. Of course, it's massively smaller than any college library would ever be. But it gives them a sense of independence, or a sense that they're not in a traditional school library.
And Carolyn says that teachers, district visitors, etc., really appreciate having an area set aside for collaboration and work areas. Stephanie noted that in Richardson ISD, they had a 3-year rollout on library renovation, and they've come a long way with their flexible furniture and creating learning zones, and that these students love it.
Yes, absolutely. So again, when I moved to the school in 2016, I was blessed and fortunate enough. There was a foundation that came to the principal and said, "We have this huge amount of money. We want to give it to you, but let us know what your ideas were." And when I was hired, he's like, "This is what I want to spend the money on, Lucy." And he said, "I've got this amount of money. You are the expert in the library. You tell me what you want to do with it and we'll just get it going." So that was the most like heavenly situation I could ever have stepped into. And then a couple of years after that, probably 2 years after I got there, I think it was in 2018, maybe 2019, our school board had a bond election, and part of the bond was for school libraries for flexible seating. And so we had another influx of money. So it was a really just a huge bonus gift to have all of that money and a principal who dedicated it to the library and to updating the library. So very, very beneficial. Okay, anything else? Any other questions? Okay, let's take a look at programming. So when we're talking about programming, think about, well, makerspaces. Let's talk about makerspaces for a while. Why would someone offer makerspaces in the library? And that will be a chat response, or put your response in the chat.
Cecilia says real life connections.
Okay, good. Anything else?
Rachel says to get kids in there. I talk about books while they're doing other things. Okay. Jackie says it allows students to be creative, to problem solve, to communicate. Amanda says STEM opportunities. Michael says flow of ideas to texts and metacognition. Cecilia says break from testing. Yeah. Caroline says makerspace activities allow students to demonstrate their learning. Allison says brings in people that might not normally be in a library. Yes. Amanda says increases student learning. Sabrina says tactile and opportunities for self-directed learning. Melissa says promotes inquiry and creativity. Ines says growth mindset. And Deirdre says options to have more things to do that they may not have offered as actual classes. And Denise says she uses maker activities like Make and Take as a way to introduce hobbies to students who haven't really had a chance to try them, and they are means to decompress and relax.
Yes, those are all fantastic responses. Let's talk about, I think somebody mentioned this in there. Think about, again, we're trying to create multiple pathways into the library for all of our students, right? So a makerspace might be really helpful for that one student who doesn't like to read, struggles with reading, but is really interested in creating things, right? And that could be whatever makerspace thing that you have. It could be with a 3D printer, right? Maybe they like designing, or maybe they're not. Again, I'm thinking of my high school courses, right? So in our career and technical education, the CTE classes, we have a robotics class and we have an engineering class, right? Unless you are in those robotic or engineering classes, you don't have access to a 3D printer on campus, except in the library, right? So that's where these students can learn how to design for the 3D printer and then then create things, right, on their 3D printer. That might be, they might not have any interest in a robotics class or in an engineering class, but they wanted to play around with the 3D printer. And so by playing around with it, then maybe later they can go on to the robotics or the engineering classes. So I think a lot of times of our scheduling and the way that creates hurdles for students who just want to explore these different ideas. The other thing for the makerspaces, someone had mentioned the Make and Take kits, and I want to, I see if y'all can hear Norman, my cat is in here with his little bell. I want you to think about using what you already have, right, on your bookshelves. So you're going to have a whole collection of how to draw books, right, or how to do lettering, or how to knit, or anything like that, right? So maybe the students don't have those supplies to practice the calligraphy writing, or they won't have the supplies, just like drawing paper. Sorry, I'm getting my cat out of the way here. They might not have the drawing paper that is just plain, tablet drawing paper, or the charcoal pencils or things like that. So creating up at the top, that top picture, you see the little bag that I would use. And these were for my little makey kits. And so the little makey, the board, that's something that we did in class, right, in the library, and a physics class would come in here, and we did all kinds of really great things. And I was thinking, like, well, again, what about the kids who aren't taking that physics class, right? They will never see this tool, and they will never have access to it. So we just bought these little boxes, put that little makey kit in there, and then I just put supplies in there that they could use for exploring on their own. This was much more helpful when all of the students then had their Chromebooks, right? So when there were some positive things that happened during the shutdown. One of those positive things was that kids could take these Chromebooks home. And so that opened up a lot of different things that I could do with the students there. So now each of the students had their Chromebooks. They could take that little makey thing. I gave directions and a website where they could find different tasks that they could use with that makey. And then that thing wasn't staying locked in my supplies closet until the physics class came in, or until I decided it was a maker day. This is nice to just have it out with the students, right? Get as many students' hands on those as you can. The same kind of thing with the knitting, right? The knitting, we got knitting needles and yarn, and we just put some of those in a bag, and then the kids could come and create, whatever it is they wanted to. So the makerspace doesn't have to be cost prohibitive, right? Like you don't have to have a 3D printer. You don't have to have all of these things, but use what is on your shelf right now, and how can you create supply kits for the kids to take home so they could practice those at home. I want to talk about, let me see. Oh yeah, let's talk about, let me go back here. My mental health Mondays. And this was a different kind of programming thing that I did in conjunction with our counselors this year. At the beginning of last year, we had mental health was, of course, one of our primary focuses as an entire campus. What can we do to help our students who just came out of a year and a half of being really isolated? And so we got together with the counselors, and I got together, and we created this Mental Health Monday options, and we had different programs, right? One of them was about stress management and time management and things that you could do to alleviate stress. One of them was like social media. I don't want to say that we didn't use the word addiction, but like managing your time on social media, right? Like when do you know that it's gone overboard and too much, and what are good, behaviors on social media, and what are troubling or kind of warning signs that you might see on social media. One was like having difficult conversations with family during the holidays. Like, what does that look like if your parents are divorced? What could that be? What could those conversations look like? And we did these periodically throughout the year, but I'm using this as an equity example because so we're on a campus of 2,800, right? We have 7 counselors. Some of the counselors do an amazing job, right? But some of the students don't feel comfortable talking to a counselor about an issue that they might have, right? So we kind of opened it up to whoever wanted to come. If you want to join us, we would have breakfast for them. These are things that your counselors can talk to you about. So kind of bringing up the topic, and then always following up with, look, if you want to have a deeper conversation or a more in-depth conversation with one of your counselors, here's how you get in touch with them, and they're here. And so it was a nice way to, again, create more pathways to helping more students. So your programming has a big factor in that. So think about how you can create different programs to help more of your students. Let's talk about funding.
Lucy, can we, so related to Mental Health Mondays, Rachel points out that something like the makerspaces allow students to have downtime. where they can color and do puzzles. And then she did Wellness Wednesdays. And then Michael has two questions. The first one is, at the high school level, are makerspaces viewed as an opportunity to fill the vacuum of cuts to CTE and trade programs? And then the second, do you want to answer that before I go into the second one?
Yeah, I will say, no, that really is. So we have a really robust CTE program on our campus. And so what I kind of use the like 3D printing and the makerspace stuff really is just to expose students to different possibilities, right? Maybe they haven't heard about the robotics class or the architecture class that we have or the engineering class. But by looking at these, you know, the 3D printing and it's a way for me to talk to them about the different opportunities that they might have on campus, right? Or that they could explore for themselves for later. So, hey, if you really like designing with this 3D printer, you know, we have a robotics class that this is, you know, they use this a lot, or we have the engineering class that uses this a lot. If you are interested in that makey kit that we had home and coding and programming, you can go into our video design class, or you can go into our you know, programming class. So it's, again, just kind of offering pathways in there. This in no way supplements. Well, I would say it maybe could supplement, but it no way replaces the robust CTE class, because it's not consistent enough. It's just like here's something that you have. Don't forget that we have these little kits that you can take home, but it's just a pathway into a conversation. Does that make sense?
And his second question is there a best practice for determining the activities for makerspaces, or is it trial and error based on local interests?
It's 100% trial and error. If there is a best practices, I mean, like, I haven't really honestly figured that out. I kind of listen to my students, like, tell me what you guys are interested in. What do y'all want to do? And the kids will come up and, you know, come up with some ideas. And some of these things were super, super simple. Like, my high schoolers, I don't know why, they love the little coloring, the really detailed coloring bookmarks, right? So we would just have, you know, coloring sheets out. Heartstopper, of course, is a massive hit on our campus, both books and the Netflix series. And we had Heartstopper coloring sheets. Those were super helpful during finals time. Like, the kids would come in and they would, you know, pick up their pages so they could color when they'd finish with their finals. So it really is, we had making stress balls. That was one of our kind of, in addition to a mental health Monday session, we just had, you know, balloons and sand and funnels, and, you know, the kids kind of had their, you know, activity there, and they would make their little stress balls. So just definitely not a tried and true science thing. I just asked the students, like, what are you guys interested in, or what do y'all want to do? And so buttons, they love making buttons, all of those things. So lots of different.
Denise mentioned origami was popular last year on her campus, and the coloring pages are out all the time.
Yeah.
And then there was a DIY Valentine craft table that drew a crowd.
Yes, any kind of craft thing, like the cards. We would do cards, or we would do like thank you leaves during Thanksgiving. And I know a lot of the stuff, when I would put some of this stuff out, I'm like, I don't know if they're gonna like this, because this seems very elementary. The kids loved it. I mean, I feel like sometimes my high schoolers are second graders in larger bodies. They enjoy some of the same kind of stuff. They enjoy puzzling. They enjoy coloring. They enjoy making cards from, you know, construction paper that we have. So, and stickers, oh my gosh, they would do anything for stickers that we had. So lots of, just try it. I mean, don't spend a whole lot of money on it first, and just try it. And if it works, then you can devote a little bit more money to it.
Caroline says there are several PD classes on how to bring a makerspace into your library program. DIMCO offers a free pre-recorded webinar, and that TCEA and TLA also offer sessions during their summits.
Definitely. All right, let's talk about funding and staffing. And I put this in here because these are conversations that you will probably have with your principal. I am in a very fortunate situation in our district where we have a kind of formula funding. So our budgets are based on the number of students that we have. We have 2,800 students, and your book budget is, whatever the price of a cost of a replacement book for each student, right? So really fantastic, strong budgets there. There are campuses who the principal decides your budget, right? Here, I can offer you this amount this year. And I've heard horror stories where it's like $1 per child. I have heard stories of, we don't have anything for you this year. There are some really strange situations with funding. When you have that situation, I think with your principal, you can talk about the different things that we've talked about, right? So the library layout or the resources or the databases and your programming, and how that can help you with, again, creating multiple pathways for all of your students into the library, into learning, into your community, right? So think about how you would have discussions about funding with your principal, but from this equity perspective, right? Like, this is going to be very inclusive for our students. So we need our large print books. They can help our ELL students. They can help our visually impaired students. They can help students who are just struggling to read, right? So think about the different groups of people or students that you can help, and that sometimes makes that funding decision a little bit better. When it comes to staffing, so in my district, high schools still have an assistant. The middle and the elementary schools don't. I hear a lot of times, librarians being pulled to cover duty. These are conversations that you need to have with your principal. Again, this is an equity issue. When you're being pulled from the library, you are now unable to assist all of these different students that are coming to your library for whatever reason it is. So think about funding and staffing as equity issues too, when you're talking to your principal, like, look, this is what I should be getting, right? Like, this is what I could be doing with this money if we're funded properly and if we're staffed properly. These are the different things that we can offer our students. Some librarians are split between two campuses, and that's not a conversation that you have with your principal, but that's hopefully conversations that district people are having. So any other? Oh, let me just do this. Make sure that when you are starting with your library, you're taking one area at a time, right? Don't try and implement all of the things at one time. Start small, start with what you have, maybe start with those makerspaces. Look at your how-to books. What how-to books do you have, and how can you use maybe supply money or stuff from the dollar store to create a little packet for them to take home? So start wherever you can, but certainly start. I wanted to share this little slide with you here. I am on Twitter. If you would like to reach out and grow your PLC, I'm at Lou Podmore on Twitter. And then if you just want to email me about whatever, Lucy Podmore TASL at gmail.com is a great way to get in touch.
And Lucy, we have another question about makerspaces from Ines. She asks, do you think it's okay to integrate makerspaces with some units of the curriculum? We had a few makerspaces in my second grade classroom, but I connected them to our science units.
100%. I think those are really great. I mean, kids like to do things, right? They like to work with their hands. They like that to me, I need to do things with my hands for that to stick, that lesson to stick. If I'm actively creating something, that's going to stick a lot better for me than just hearing something, right? I can, even if it's just writing, even if it's just taking notes, I need to be doing something for that to stick, because I'll remember it a little bit better. Your teachers will be thrilled if you can connect whatever it is that they're doing in their classroom curriculum to the library visit. A lot of times, unfortunately, some teachers are seeing the library visit as something extra. If you can tell them, no, this is part of your curriculum, right? Like, this is helping you in the classroom as well. That's a great way to attract those teachers.
And Cecilia points out that if you do this in collaboration with your teachers, it's a great way to build those relationships.
Absolutely, definitely. You definitely want to be seen as a partner with your teachers, right? And not as something extra. And that's something that will continue throughout your library career. Like that started with me at my very first library. I still have it now. But again, I'm going to just give a shout out to my English teachers. They are incredible and amazing. And I have very consistent library attendance, which I think is kind of rare in a high school, but my English teachers are bringing their kids very consistently to check out new books in the library and to do book talks and, to do gallery, even if it's just a gallery walk, right? They're using the space. I will very sneakily put displays around the spaces that they're using to make sure that the kids see, look at the new stuff that we have, right? So any way you can get those students and teachers in the library, that's the goal.
Thank you. And then Carolyn points out about funding options. For your resources, you can talk about your district foundation grants, Dollar Tree, Laura Bush Foundation, Donors Choose. Any of you taking Info 5345 with me, you will learn about all of these resources and you'll get to know grant writing quite well.
Good. That's definitely a great skill to have. And that's an excellent, I'm glad you're touching on that in your classes because, funding isn't the same everywhere and you don't know where you're going to end up. And so it's definitely a good skill to have.
Excellent. Any final questions?
I hope this was very helpful and you have a new way to think about decisions that you're making in your library with your budget, with your resources, with your layout, with the shelving. I was going to tell you about this. Actually, when I was talking about genrefying my collection, so there's lots of different ways to do this, right? And the way that I have it in my library is all of the fantasy books have purple stickers on them, right? And they're in a specific fantasy section. All the horror books have red stickers on the spine and they're in the horror section and they're arranged alphabetically within their sections. A colleague of mine has kept every single book alphabetical, but they put different colored dots, right? So if it's a horror book, then the red dot goes on that spine. If it's a fantasy, then the purple sticker goes on that spine. So there's different ways you can do it. You don't have to shift around your entire collection, but just think about different ways that you can make it easier for your kids to find the books that they want. Oh, I am so happy that this was, I've seen all the thank yous and thank you, Dr. Moore, for having me on here. This is, I love talking to new librarians and people who are just coming into the field. Is always happy to share lessons that I have learned, mistakes that I have made and lessons that I have learned and hoping that, the goal is to make our Texas libraries as strong as they could be. And the only way we can do that is if we're working together. So.
I agree. Well, thank you, Lucy, for joining us and for helping us think about and guiding us through a discussion about 4 types of equity in school libraries. And thanks to all of you who gave up, an hour of your Wednesday night. I know you're busy to attend and to learn and to share. We here at UNT, we appreciate you all as individuals and for what you do for our profession, but most importantly, what you're doing for our learners. This presentation has been recorded except for the introduction that I forgot to record. And it will be posted on the Multiple Literacies website. And there's a link in the chat. It usually takes 24 to 48 hours for us to get that up there. We also encourage you to visit the MLL website frequently, to subscribe to our listserv, and then to like and subscribe to our MLL YouTube channel. And check back soon for information about our August presentation. We are taking July off because of IASL and IFLA conferences, but in August we'll be back in full swing, and we hope to see you there virtually. We hope to see you at CLA. For those of you that can go to ALA, AASL, we hope to see you there too. And thank you again, Lucy, for presenting. Thank you again all for attending, and have a lovely evening. And remember to stay hydrated because it's hot out there, y'all.